It's a good idea to use simple, everyday language when writing content intended to be read online. In other words, to use what's called plain language. We want to keep our content as simple as possible because that way it'll be easier for people to scan and understand. But what about if you have a specialized audience in a complex domain? What if you write for graduate students, lawyers, geologists, or surgeons, for example? People who have a high level of expertise in their fields. Should you still try to use plain language in that situation? Here's the important thing to remember. You can use technical terminology as long as you know that it will make sense to the person that you're writing for. Technical language isn't a problem unless it's jargon to your audience. So how do you know if a specific word counts as technical terminology or jargon? Jargon is in the eye of the beholder. The same word can be meaningful technical terminology to one person, but totally meaningless jargon to another. For example, when my husband and I bought our first house, it had some problems, and we didn't know anything about home improvement or repairs. So we had to learn a lot of terminology. For example, let's consider the word joist. A general contractor can read that word and think about exactly what it is, picture it in her mind, and imagine it in context. Someone like me, who doesn't work in construction or architecture, might read that same word and have no clue what it is. So you can use technical terminology in your writing as long as you know it will be meaningful and not meaningless. That's the key. So how can you figure out what terminology your readers will know? If you're writing for a professional field that requires formal training, that can help you determine which terminology people will be familiar with. For example, orthopedic surgeons have to go through rigorous training, and they learn a formally defined and shared vocabulary. So if I'm writing content for those surgeons, I might have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be familiar with. You can also do things like checking search logs or looking at customer support transcripts to determine what terminology people use when they're speaking about that domain. Finally, simply talking to your users is the best way to learn which terms they're going to be familiar with. User interviews and usability testing are especially helpful for this. The key is to identify who you're writing this piece of content for, and then determine which terms and concepts they're going to be familiar with. And remember, even if your users are highly educated, they're just like anyone else. They want digital content that's easy and pleasant to read.